Jared Wicks here with the Heel to the Face podcast, and the Greatest Royal Rumble is in the books Friday afternoon in just about 5 hours of length. The Greatest Royal Rumble pay-per-view event from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia took place, and the toothpaste is out of the tube. A Royal Rumble of more than 30 participants outside of the traditional Royal Rumble setting in January took place for the first time since a house show in 1994 had a 30-man Royal Rumble. This is the first time over 30 men have ever been in a Royal Rumble outside of the January pay-per-view in history, and indeed was the biggest Royal Rumble event. And no longer can Michael Cole or any of the announcers right before the January Royal Rumble say the one time a year or once a year, because, well, we learned that twice in 2018 we had a Royal Rumble, and this one was even bigger and probably even more important. While Jonathan Coachman earlier on Twitter told me that the importance still lies with the January Royal Rumble, the fact that Vince McMahon was down at the ring to present Braun Strowman with the trophy and a championship belt signifying his greatest Royal Rumble win, despite the fact that it is not a surefire shot to the main event of WrestleMania as the traditional Royal Rumble gives you, WWE definitely values the importance of this event, maybe even more so than the January and traditional Royal Rumble. This was the first Royal Rumble of more than 30 participants outside of the January event in WWE history, and it was the first Royal Rumble of at least 30 participants since a house show at Madison Square Garden hosted a Royal Rumble in 1994. All the records were set. Most eliminations in Royal Rumble history, Braun Strowman with 13. Longest time in a Royal Rumble, Daniel Bryan, 1 hour and 16 minutes, almost 10 full minutes longer than the previous record holder, Rey Mysterio. And the shortest time in a Royal Rumble, Mike Kanellis, with under 1 second. So every record was set. The participants, while not so much of a surprise, most of the surprises were NXT superstars, not big-name NXT superstars outside of Roderick Strong, for the fact that NXT was hosting a show in Florida the same day, so a lot of low-level NXT stars in the event. But, well, like I said, they can no longer say once a year the Royal Rumble took place. Personally, I felt that this could have been done a lot better. When it comes to World Wrestling Entertainment emphasizing the word world, I am its #1 advocate. I feel that WWE should travel around the world more than they do, and I'm not talking about house shows or Monday Night Raws. I'm saying big-time pay-per-view events should be held all over the world. I would love to see the UK host another SummerSlam or even WrestleMania. Heck, I would have been perfectly fine if Saudi Arabia hosted the greatest Royal Rumble ever in January when the Royal Rumble is scheduled to take place. I felt that this event could have been done way better for the fact that WrestleMania was just 3 weeks ago and Backlash on pay-per-view is just 1 week away. So to hold an event that had all the pomp and circumstance of a WrestleMania, in fact, more fireworks than any WrestleMania that I have seen in my life, is definitely degrading to their own product. They obviously ruined their own Royal Rumble. I had a Twitter poll earlier today, and 63% agreed with me that this makes the regular Royal Rumble in January a lesser event. And that's a big deal because next year in January, they expect to get over 50,000 people at Chase Field in Phoenix, Arizona to watch the Royal Rumble. So now that they've made it a lesser event by having it now just a traditional 30-man Royal Rumble, and definitely they can't use the moniker Greatest Royal Rumble ever, despite the fact of how many people are in it, I would be very surprised if WWE doesn't do something to try to bring back the integrity of the original Royal Rumble. Maybe make next year's Royal Rumble in Chase Field 50 men or even more. But most importantly, this event went down today, and it not just was about the Royal Rumble, but everything in terms of a pay-per-view was on the line. Icebreaker 21 Brandon Clements, when we did the rundown for the show, got everything 100% right, except for where we both got it wrong, and that's Roman Reigns did not leave as a Universal Champion, even though it looks like he should have. I predicted that Roman Reigns would bust through the cage and be the first to touch the ground, winning technically. Well, that's exactly what did happen. He burst through the cage with Brock Lesnar, and he was the first to touch the ground while Brock Lesnar's feet dangled still in the air. It's kind of weird that they gave the win to Roman Reigns, especially at an event called the Royal Rumble, because at the Royal Rumble is a time of year that it definitely emphasizes the fact that both feet must touch the ground. Obviously, in the Royal Rumble in the past, we've seen Kofi Kingston pretty much touch every bit of the ground except for with his feet, so he doesn't get eliminated. So literally, the match right before the Royal Rumble, we see somebody get thrown out of a cage, land on the floor, but their feet still hanging in the air, and they lose the match because they say that his body, Brock Lesnar's body, touched first, and that's who they gave the win to. So everyone was wrong there. Brock Lesnar is still the Universal Champion, but everything else kind of went with a house show mentality. New champions in the sense of Matt Hardy and Bray Wyatt are new tag team champions. That seemed like a foregone conclusion as they were the only of the two teams that are still on Raw. Every other championship retained, including AJ Styles with a double countout versus Shinsuke Nakamura, similar to what you would see at a house show. But like I said, most important on this event was the fact that they seem to ruin the Royal Rumble. They take an event that happens only once a year, that has all the pomp and circumstances of the second biggest pay-per-view event in the WWE calendar. The fact that WWE hasn't had another Royal Rumble match outside of its pay-per-view since 1994, and that was at a house show. So they've never had a Royal Rumble match televised outside of the pay-per-view event. And well, Jonathan Coachman told me on Twitter earlier today that the Royal Rumble still has its importance because of the fact the winner goes on to WrestleMania. The match itself is still very unique, and from 1988 all the way up until 1992, the match didn't have any importance. People bought the pay-per-view event strictly on the match. And the match itself, we all know, is only about 5 or 6 competitors that we feel that could actually win the Royal Rumble each year. We don't get excited because of those 5 or 6 competitors. We do get excited for the people who we know are not going to win, but for the surprises and the match itself. It's the one match a year where we know that people like the Ascension are not going to win this, or we know that Kofi Kingston isn't going to win the Royal Rumble, but we get excited for that aspect of the match, despite the fact that we know that they're not going to win the event. So to say that the importance still lies in the January Royal Rumble, and that's what we get excited about, isn't 100% accurate. I do get excited about the match itself, and I felt that this card was very stacked. I felt that there was enough opportunities on this card to not need a Royal Rumble. After the Universal Championship match was over, this was a 3-hour and 40-minute event. Championships were on the line. All the biggest superstars were in action. John Cena, The Undertaker, Triple H, Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns. I felt that that card alone would be enough to sell out a stadium, not just in Saudi Arabia, who haven't seen WWE in a long time, but anywhere in the world, including the United States. If SummerSlam had the card that this event had without the Royal Rumble, it would have sold out easily. So I don't feel that they needed to even have a Royal Rumble. Now, if they wanted to do like WrestleMania and have everybody on the card, the best of the rest, if you will, they could have had an Andre the Giant style Battle Royal. Or even if they wanted to have a Royal Rumble, they could have had a 10-man Royal Rumble or a 15-man Royal Rumble. We've seen that in WWE before because of the fact that they've had 8-man Royal Rumbles or even 10-man Royal Rumbles on Raw and SmackDown as qualifiers to get into the actual event. But they actually denigrated the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. 50 men were in this. It was every 90 seconds, even though it felt at a few times that it was under a minute for the entries. But more importantly, it lasted about an hour and 25 minutes. Braun Strowman won the Royal Rumble, like I predicted, and he got a trophy and a championship belt. What are the implications of this come next year's Royal Rumble? What are the implications of this event when they return to Saudi Arabia? Are we going to see the greatest SummerSlam ever? Are we going to see the greatest WrestleMania ever? Are we going to see even bigger events? Like I said, this event was catering more to families than it was to single individuals. WrestleMania is a very long event, but most people who attend WrestleMania are on vacation. This was an event catering to families in the Jeddah area. So did it need to go past 12 o'clock a.m. local time? It could have ended at 10:30 to 11 o'clock, and I felt everybody in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and the whole Middle East that attended this event would have been satisfied. I don't think this actually was helpful because kids might have gotten a little bored with wrestling. I know a lot of people complain at WrestleMania, even adults who pay good money to go to WrestleMania, that the event is pretty long. So to have an event where most of the people in attendance were families be almost 5 hours long and go past 12 o'clock a.m. local time seems a little counterproductive for the WWE trying to expand their product. But as you know, this is not the last event in Saudi Arabia. There are going to be much more. This was a huge way to kick off their trip to Saudi Arabia, but I feel that they ruined a special event. Money in the Bank ladder matches or Hell in a Cells, they weren't invented around events. They were single matches, and they can be used at any time. But the Royal Rumble was an event solely named the Royal Rumble. Hence, this event was also named the Royal Rumble, showing the importance of the match. More importantly, just like WrestleMania or Survivor Series, this pay-per-view has a storied history. 1988 was the first ever 20-man Royal Rumble. 1989 was the first ever 30-man Royal Rumble. They've had one 40-man Royal Rumble, and 2 times the championship was on the line. But for the most part, the Royal Rumble event seems to be untainted and the most important single match in WWE on the calendar year. So how will they treat the Royal Rumble next year? How will they return to Saudi Arabia? What is next? Does this have any implications for how they're going to treat WrestleMania or any other big events? Because as you saw at the Greatest Royal Rumble, it felt like WrestleMania. In fact, it felt like WrestleMania in an aspect that they could have, unlike WrestleMania, they got a lot of matches in a short period of time. The event was about 3 hours and 40 minutes after the Brock Lesnar match, and that is a short period of time for how many matches they did have on the card. They would have had a battle royal, let's say, in the kickoff show. This would have been a lengthy event with the same amount of matches as WrestleMania, not nearly as long because they didn't have musical performances or anything like that, or big long breaks. They did have a 15-minute intermission for prayer locally, which kind of ticks me off because I've always been advocating for a WrestleMania intermission so that I could use the bathroom, go buy concessions, etc. And here they actually added in a 15-minute break, which was perfect. They went to the kickoff panel. They talked about what already happened, what is going to happen, had a few video packages. So even though in that country they needed it for prayer, they could easily use that in the United States so I can go get a snack, and this event would have still been under 4 hours long. This event did not need a Royal Rumble. It did not need a Battle Royal. It did not need any additional matches. It had 9 solid matches. 3 hours and 40 minutes of action. Not a lot of filler. Everybody was in attendance that was of importance. The Hardys were there. The championships were on the line. So I feel that I hope the WWE treats its product a little bit better in the future. It treats its product with a little more integrity. But Braun Strowman did win this Greatest Royal Rumble ever, and all records were set. So I wonder how they're going to take the longest appearance in a Royal Rumble, the most eliminations, and the shortest time in a Royal Rumble into its actual event come January. This has been a quick Greatest Royal Rumble recap. I'm Jared Wicks for the Heel to the Face podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube at Heel to the Face podcast and follow us on Twitter at Heel to the Face.